Hi everybody, here today to do a demonstration on cyanotypes, our next project after our black and white silver gelatin work. Cyanotypes, sometimes called blueprints, sometimes called sunprints, is an alternative process that is alternative to the silver gelatin prints we did for the beginning of the semester. And instead of silver being the light sensitive material, like in the black and white prints we did earlier this semester, cyanotype sensitizes iron. It is iron that's the light sensitive metal that we're going to use. It is a hands-on process, and you bought watercolor paper and the part A and B chemistry for cyanotypes. One of the great things about cyanotypes is this is something that you can do at home because it requires only the sun, the two chemistries that you bought, and water to develop it. So let's get started. First thing you want to do is you want to set up your work area. You can see I laid out some newspaper, some newsprint here. Cyanotype will stain, so you want to be careful that you don't get it on your clothes or on the table, particularly on your mother's table or tablecloth. You're welcome to wear gloves if you want to. It's not particularly toxic, but it may stain your fingers. And if you're particularly chemically sensitive, it may affect your skin a little bit. You may feel it as a little bit of a rash. So feel free to wear gloves if you want, but the material is not particularly toxic. You can use some of the everyday stuff that you have in your house for the containers and the measuring devices that we'll need for the process today. Best if you use things that you don't eat with. But try to find something that you use to clean the house with or use in the garage or the basement as opposed to something you eat with. But you really only need something to measure equal parts of A and B and some container to hold it in while you mix it and put it on the brush to brush it on the paper. So collect up all your parts and pieces, put some newsprint down, wear some gloves so that you don't get it on your hands or stain any of the material underneath your work area or that you might be wearing. You'll need your digital negative that I printed for you guys and supplied to you. You'll need your watercolor paper. Here's one big sheet that we'll use. A pencil, scissors, the sponge brush, which can be replaced with another kind of paintbrush. Anything that you can use to brush the solution on. The solution is thin like water, so sponge brushes work better than paint brushes, but you can really use anything that you would use to paint on something would be fine. You can even use a rag or a regular sponge if need be, but these cheap sponge brushes seem to work best. You'll need a container to hold the solution in once you've mixed it. Plastic, metal, ceramic is fine. You'll need something to measure out equal parts of A and B. I have this graduated cylinder, which works really nicely, but you can use anything in your house. You can use a tablespoon measurements. You could use a third of a cup measurements, or anything that you can measure at equal amounts. It doesn't matter what the amount is exactly, just that it's equal parts of A and B. And then, of course, your chemistry that you bought in the bottle, part A and part B. My bottles look a little different from yours because I bought the chemistry in powdered form and then mixed it myself into liquid. You bought a type that is mixed into the liquid already. And then something to create your contact print exposure with. At simplest, all you need is something on the back, something that's stiff on the back like this board here, and a piece of glass or plexiglass to put over the top to weigh it together. If you have a book and a piece of glass or plexiglass laying around the house, that works perfectly fine. Another way to do it on the cheap is to use a picture frame. So if you have a picture frame in the house already, 8.5 by 11 is the size we're going to use. So as long as it's an 8.5 by 11 picture frame or larger, it should work fine. If you don't have one around the house to use, you can go to Michael's or the 99-cent store and should be able to pick up a relatively cheap 8.5 by 11 frame that you can use. You can take it apart. All you really need is the glass or plastic clear part that's in the front. So that should be easy enough to get your hands on. Once we have all of our pieces that we need for the process all collected together and our equipment, we're ready to get started. First thing we want to do is we want to prep our paper, get our paper ready to be printed on. Clearly it comes in one big sheet, so what we need to do is cut this down. We also need to identify the front or the top. This paper has a coating on it. It's called sizing. This paper has been sized. That is, a special coating has been applied to the top that helps take the cyanotype solution. One of the reasons I had you buy this paper in particular is because it comes pre-sized. We don't have to size it ourselves. That way it'll take the cyanotype solution much more successfully, and the prints will come out better. So we need to know what is the front, what side has that coating, that sizing on it. The way we do that is we hold the paper up to the light and we look for the watermark. The watermark is going to be some letters, some writing. It's usually in the corner, and it will say arches, and it will have a little infinity symbol or something like that. It's been pressed into the paper. It's not printed on the paper, but it's been pressed into the paper, and so you can't see it when you look at the paper on the table, but if you hold it up to light, you will be able to see it. If you can read it, then that is the front of the paper. That is the side with the sizing on it. So as long as you can read the watermark, you know that that's the front. Best to do, once you've determined the front, take a pencil and mark a little X in each corner of the paper. That will remind you what side is the front side with the sizing. Now that we've determined the correct side of the paper, let's cut the paper down into sizes that are more appropriate for what we're using. That is to match the size of our digital negative, which is 8.5 by 11, or letter size, sometimes called. So what we'll do is we'll use our digital negative. We want to be careful with this. It's delicate. We don't want to put our fingerprints all on the front of it. We don't want to scratch it, and we definitely don't want to get it wet. So as long as you're careful with it, you can kind of use this as your template. So we'll line this up with the paper and go ahead and hold it down gently, and then just trace along the outside. We'll move it on to the next one, and we'll do the same thing. We'll trace that one through, and you repeat that all the way until you've marked the full piece of paper, which will get you 6 8.5 by 11s. So you should get 6 8.5 by 11s. Once you've traced out each of the rectangles that you're going to cut, go ahead and mark an X in the corner of each of those again, to remind yourself of what the top side is. Once you cut these smaller pieces out of the larger sheet, you're going to lose your watermark, and you're going to lose some of the X's that you see in the corner. So best to mark each of your sheets as well. So again, to show you, I've only traced a couple out here for quickness of the demonstration, but you can see that I have traced out the rectangles and marked a little X in the corner, so that I know what the side is that has that coating on it, that sizing. Once you've made those marks, you can go ahead and take your scissors and cut those out of the larger sheet. And so here I have a couple of my cut sheets. You're going to have 6. I just have 2 here that I'm going to use. I wouldn't cut too much of your paper at once, because you're never quite sure what you're going to do with it later. So I would go ahead and cut one piece of paper down and get 6, and then coat 6 of these with your cyanotype solution. The cyanotype solution, once mixed A and B together, is light sensitive, and so you have to keep it away from sunlight and UV light, the kind that we have in the fluorescent lights above us. When I'm ready to make the coating on the paper, I'm going to turn off these fluorescent lights and turn on a regular household bulb, a tungsten light bulb or incandescent light bulb. This is an example of a regular light bulb, just one that you would find in your lamp at home. This kind of light it is not going to expose your cyanotype. Your cyanotype is not sensitive to this kind of light, mainly because this has very little UV light that comes through. Cyanotypes are exposed with UV light, which the sun has a lot of, and fluorescent lights give a lot of UV light off as well. So as long as we have just a regular household light bulb on, we can coat our paper and do our work without fear of exposing. Another benefit of cyanotype, unlike the black and white where we have to work in the darkroom with the safe light, cyanotypes we can just do in dim light, and that's fine. A good process, a good workflow for you guys at home to do this at home would be to wait until the evening at night, set yourself up in your room where you have all the lights off besides one lamp, one dim lamp in the corner. You'll coat your paper in that lamp. You'll mix your chemistry and coat your paper in that dim light. Once you're done coating your paper, you have to let it dry. That takes about 30 minutes or so, 40 minutes. And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll lay it underneath my bed, or I'll put it in the closet, or I'll clean out the clothes from one of my dresser drawers and I'll lay it in that dresser drawer and then close the dresser. What you're trying to prevent is any sunlight from hitting it in the morning. So as long as you have it away from the sunlight, it'll be fine until you're ready to use it. But it only lasts for about 3 or 4 days, even if you keep it in the dark. After that, it will start to kind of spoil. So you don't want to coat too many sheets of paper ahead of time. Just coat as many as you're going to use for that session or that day. So I would say something like 6. If you cut and coat 6 sheets, that's a good amount for each round of cyanotypes you're going to do. Doesn't take long for it to dry, so you can always make more pretty quickly. But what you want to do is just protect it from the sunlight and from things like fluorescent light until you're ready to make your exposure. And again, regular incandescent or tungsten household light bulbs are safe. It's safe to use and coat your paper under that kind of light. So again, what you would do, set up your station at night when there's no lights on with maybe just one household bulb, coat your paper, put it somewhere safe for it to dry until the next day. Once morning comes on the next day, you can take your dried paper, put it together with your negative, and take it outside to expose. And I'll show you that process in a minute once we're done coating the paper. Okay, so we have our 2 sheets of paper coated. We have our little X's in the corner to let me know what is the correct size to put the solution on. And so now we're ready to mix the solution. So now I want to turn off these overhead lights here, these fluorescent lights, and just have my one regular light bulb going. So that way I won't expose my cyanotype solution, because once I mix the two together, it is light sensitive. All right, guys, so now we're ready to go ahead and mix our solution and apply it to our paper, because we're working in only a dim household bulb, only the tungsten bulb. It doesn't really matter how much you mix, just as long as it's equal parts of A and B. You don't want to mix too much in the beginning. It goes a long way. And so you can always mix more, but you don't want to have to throw a lot away. You have about enough to make 50 8x10 prints. So you should have more than enough to make the 3 final cyanotypes that we're going to make. That may be something like 30 prints altogether. So just mix small amount to start with. I would say you could mix something like 3 tablespoons of A with 3 tablespoons of B. That's probably a good amount to start off with when you're coating your paper. And then you can always mix more if you need more. So again, exact amount is not important as long as it's equal amounts of A and B. And I think starting off with something like 3 tablespoons of each is good. I have this graduated cylinder, so I'm going to measure out 20 milliliters of each of the solutions, and that's going to give me plenty for the demonstration and plenty to coat 6 sheets of paper if that's what I wanted to do. So there's 20 milliliters of part A, and now we will add the 20 milliliters of part B. And again, as soon as I mix these two together, it becomes sensitive to light. And so I want to make sure that I don't take it out into the sunlight or expose it to any fluorescent light. Really expose it to anything besides the regular household light bulb, that tungsten or iridescent bulb. The 2 chemistries that I'm mixing together are ferric ammonium citrate and potassium ferrocyanide. You see that ferrous, that's the Latin for iron. So iron is the metal that we have in the cyanotype solution. So I'll go ahead and just swirl this together to get it a good mix. Like I said, it is light sensitive now, so I wouldn't want to take this outside. And this is only good for the day. You can't really save the solution once you've mixed it together. The solution separate in the bottle lasts for a long time, at least 6 months. But once you mix them together, it's really only good for that day. So now I've got my 2 pieces of paper. Again, I've got some newsprint laid down on the table so that we don't stain anything. One of the cool things about cyanotype is that it works on nearly anything it will stick to. T-shirts, wood, stone, other fabrics, really anything that it will stick to, it works on. So a lot of people do cyanotypes on T-shirts. A lot of people do it on wood or cardboard. We're using watercolor paper, which is a classic material for alternative process printing, but you can really put it on anything. And that's to say that if you don't put some newsprint or something underneath it, you're going to go ahead and put it on your kitchen table, which you probably don't want to do. So careful that you don't spill it or get any on the table, but also realize that you can use this on just about anything. So if you kind of dig this process, know that you've got lots of different materials that you could put it on. Okay, we've got our solution mixed and ready to go. We'll dip our sponge brush in. Really just the end of the brush, just getting a little bit of solution on there. You really don't need that much on the brush. And then what I like to do is I like to go one direction first on the paper. And once I've gone through in one direction, then I'll get a little bit more on the brush and I'll go in a different direction. I'll sort of turn 90 degrees and brush the other way. And you can kind of work it into the surface a little bit, brushing it back and forth. What you're looking for is a nice even coat, and you don't want to put too much solution on. If your paper is buckling, if you're getting little puddles of solution on your paper, you're putting too much on. You don't want to see any streaks come through the paper. If you see streaks, you're not putting enough on. So really, it's best to put several light coats. That's the easiest way to do it. You don't really want to dump the solution on there. You just want to put several light coats. So that looks pretty good. And for as much as you guys can see in the camera there, a nice even solution. It's got kind of this yellow lime green color, kind of like Mountain Dew. So a nice even solution without any puddles or streaks. And you don't have to go all the way to the edge of the paper. You can leave a little bit of a border around it. One of the nice things about cyanotypes, along with the other things I've listed today, is sort of the painterly quality that it has, because you brush it on. And so it does have this sort of painterly, sort of romantic feeling to it, particularly because it's such an old process. And so we kind of embrace that nature of it, and it's nice to have that kind of painted edge. If you wanted to make it nice and even, you could use tape, and you could tape around the edge of the paper and mask off a border if you wanted it to be nice and neat. But again, I would suggest you kind of embrace that painterly quality of cyanotypes and have that nice kind of uneven edge that's on there. So again, a little bit on the brush. Brush it one direction and then come in and brush it in sync. Both ways. Up and down. Get a little bit more on the brush if you need it. Again, I would do in one direction first, and then I would do 98 degrees the other way. Yes, those are boy band jokes. Okay. Nice even coating, no streaks, no puddles, and the paper is not buckling or wrinkling, so I know I put on the right amount of solution. It will take roughly 20 or 30 minutes for the solution to dry, depending on how humid it is, what the environment, atmosphere is like. You can dry it again underneath your bed, in the closet, in the drawer, anywhere where it will be safe. Once it's dry, and you can tell that by if you touch the back of your hand to it and it doesn't feel cool, it just feels room temperature, then you can tell that it's dry. Once it's dry, you can put them together in a folder and put it away in a binder, and that will protect it from light. So once it's dry, you can put it together and protect it from light that way. And again, they'll be good for a day or two, maybe 3 at the most, but you kind of want to use them the next day. Best workflow is to coat the paper at night, let it dry overnight, and then expose them in the morning. Okay, we have our 2 pieces of paper coated, and we would put them away to dry. Now I have some paper I coated already. That's dry and ready for us to do the rest of the demonstration. So I'll go ahead and I'll get that paper that's ready to go. Guys, here is some paper that I coated earlier. And I will take a piece out of here and use this for our exposure. Again, maybe difficult to see, but it's got this kind of lime green color on there. and it's nice and even. I don't see any of the paper coming through anywhere, and I have that nice border around the edge and that nice painterly edge on there, ready to go. At this point, the solution is dry and you don't really need the gloves anymore, so I'm going to take mine off to make it easier to handle the material. So now what we need to do is we need to put together our contact print sandwich. And contact printing, just like with the black and white prints we made, those are contact prints. That means that the negative is coming into direct contact with the paper, with whatever media it is we're printing on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our backing, our stiff backboard, and we're going to put the paper on the back, the backing. Then we're going to take our digital negative, and our digital negative has two sides. One side is a little cloudier than the other. And so the cloudy side is the back side. This is the front side, the side that's a little darker. The back side's the cloudy side. So the cloudy side goes down. Cloudy side goes down on the paper. And so that way we know that the paper is right ways and right side. So now we are going to take our glass and place our glass on top. And that is going to weigh our sandwich down. That is going to press our negative into the paper so that it lays totally flat against the paper, and that's going to make it in focus. If we didn't do that, it would be easy for it to slide and get off register, and it may bow up a little bit, which would cause it to be out of focus. And so what we want to do is we want to squeeze that paper down so it's flat against our sheet of paper from edge to edge, and that will keep the whole thing in focus. So now we're ready to take this outside and go ahead and expose it in the sun. So let me get my jacket on and I'll meet you outside. All right, guys, so we're outside now, and I brought it out and found a place in the sun, nice and sunny spot for us to put it down. And so you can see here that I have the cyanotype down on the bench in a nice sunny spot. So in the sun, our cyanotypes take about 5 minutes to expose in the bright sun. If it's a cloudy day, it'll take something more like 20 minutes. And so you'll have to do some tests and see, but we'll leave it out here for the 5 minutes and let it expose in the sun. And again, 5 minutes in the bright sun, about 20 minutes on a cloudy day, something like that. Try to pick consistent days. Try to use the same type of day. Try to use sunny days. It'll be easier and faster. But certainly when you're working on the same negative, try to expose it on days that are similar. That'll help keep the variabilities down and keep the consistency up. So once we're done with the 5 minutes, then we'll take it inside and we will develop it in a tray of water. So see you back inside. Guys, while we're back inside here, just waiting a few minutes for our cyanotype to finish exposing outside in the sun, I just wanted to show you one other thing we can do with cyanotypes, and really with black and white prints as well, that can be very cool. And for those of you that might not have a digital negative or might want it to do something a little more fun or interesting, this is a cool project for you to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to use cyanotypes to do something called photograms. And photograms are essentially negative-less prints. And so photograms are just taking a series of objects and laying them down on top of the paper and allowing them to block some amount of the sun coming through to then print the objects and patterns down on the paper. So really you can find objects that have different levels of translucency and opacity to them and layer them on one another to get really cool effects. And so for instance, I'll grab a few things here. Again, I want something relatively stiff on the bottom to hold it up. So I'll take like a pair of scissors and lay them on here. Maybe I'll take one of these rubber gloves and lay it down. Interestingly, I will grab a few objects that I have over here laying around that have different levels of opacity and different kind of shapes to them. And I'll lay them down. You can stack things up one on top of the other. You can use materials that are made out of different cloth, or here's a round one. Here's like a little kind of cool metal object I'll put down there. So I'll take this outside and I'll put this in the sun as well and see what we get. See the resulting Okay guys, we're back inside after being outside for about a 5-minute exposure. You can see I've got my regular cyanotype here being made in the negative, and then I've got my collection of objects on here for our cyanotype photogram. So all we need to do now to finish these up is to develop them, and we do that in water. And so in the sink here, I have a tray of water that's filled and overflowing slowly. You can see I've got the faucet on a little bit. You can use anything like for this that will hold water. You can use a tray or a pan of water. If you needed to fill up the bathtub or the sink to do this, you could. But anything that will hold water and will let it overflow just a little bit. And you need to do that for about 20 minutes. And what we're doing is we're washing out all of the unexposed cyanotype solution that didn't get hit by the sun. And that's going to wash right out of the print. Once we're done washing it for about 20 minutes, then we can just lay it out on a towel or on some newspaper or hang it with a clothespin to dry like clothes. This thick, heavyweight watercolor paper is pretty durable, so you can just hang it up with clothespins. So let's go ahead and take apart, gently, take apart our cyanotype here. And you can see we've got sort of a latent image on our cyanotype, but that's got all the solution still on it that wasn't exposed. And now what we're going to do is just go ahead and put that in the water. Lay that in the water. Now I'll go ahead and I'll disassemble my photogram, my cyanotype photogram. And you can see again the latent image and where some of the objects have left the design. And I'll go ahead and place that in the water as well. Now I'll gently move our camera here and just into the bin so you can kind of see what's going on in there. And see that that solution is being washed out of the cyanotype, and you can already see how much of the cyanotype is starting to come out just by washing away that solution. You can see it's kind of that yellowy color. And so periodically what I'll do, sorry about the camera guys, but periodically, what I would do with cyanotypes is I just come in and kind of push them down gently. And then I would just dump out some of the water that's full of the cyanotype solution and just let it fill up again, just so we don't get too much cyanotype solution in there. The water doesn't get saturated with it. And you can see our photogram, how that's coming out already, showing different levels of translucency in the different objects. And again, how our cyanotype with the negative is coming out as well. Now this is a little light. It will dry down, but I probably would have done this outside for maybe like 7 minutes or maybe 8 minutes to have made it just a little darker, get a little bit more density to it. So I'll leave those in the solution running for another 15 minutes or so until they're dry, until they're ready all the way. And then I'll take them and I'll lay them down on a screen or a piece of paper. There are excellent ways to lay out the dry prints. And here are some cyanotypes I made earlier in the week as a demonstration here in class. Same negative, just slightly different densities. So you can lay them down on a screen or just on a towel or some newspaper. Or, like I said, you can pin them up and hang them in the bathroom. Hang them on a clothesline and they can dry. After that, you just want to put them away in a folder and keep them stored nice and neatly and dried so that they're protected. We'll be taking a digital photograph of them in the end, and that's what you'll upload to the Google Classroom to satisfy the assignment. Well, thank you very much, and I'll see everybody soon.